Welcome to episode 16 of the Mass Business Podcast. My name is Matt Ward. I am your host, and today I've got a great guest for you. Mike Savage is a serial entrepreneur, inspirational keynote speaker, and badass business coach. He's the CEO of The Savage Secrets, a rapidly growing high-performance business coaching organization obsessed with helping entrepreneurs win the hard-hitting sport of business. He's located in Auburn, Mass. Having built several companies over the past 30 years, Mike is battle-tested from the school of hard knocks, and he fully understands the emotional and financial roller coaster of building multi-million-dollar businesses from scratch. I'm excited to share with you an interview with Mike Savage of The Savage Secrets. Are you ready? Let's go! Welcome to the Mass Business Podcast, where small business owners, also known as risk takers, share their stories about the growth of their business and themselves. Our interviews and our content is focused on growing a small business and understanding networking and referrals. I say it all the time, and I'll say it again today. You never know where your next referral will come from. Hey, welcome back to the podcast. We're happy that you're here listening on your favorite podcast app and watching right here on YouTube. Happy to have you. Welcome to the show, Mike Savage.
Super excited to be here, Matt, and I absolutely love that intro song.
Isn't it awesome?
Well done.
You know, when you build great relationships, what your friends will do for you, that is my good friend Kelta Kelly, Berkeley-trained musician. He opened up twice for Darius Rucker. He was in Nashville long ago, and now he's an Edward Jones financial advisor and just playing music for fun now. And he's such a great musician. I love it. And
very cool.
Before the pandemic, Mike, me and that's not even proper English. Kelta and I would have breakfast every Friday morning. It was at local diner and just talk business, and it was so great. And I miss those relationships. Hopefully we'll be getting back to those really soon. In the next 30 seconds or so, share with the listening and viewing audience exactly what it is you do.
You know, you said it in the intro real simply. I help entrepreneurs win this hard-hitting, emotional, and financial roller coaster sport of business so they can live the life of their dreams. You know,
yeah,
plain and simple. You know, I know the journey. I know the challenge. I've started and built many companies, and you know, it's not all about spreadsheets and social media and business plans. It can play with this little thing that sits on your shoulders as well.
Play with your head, yeah. So let's dig into that, because I'm so tired of business plans. Tell me how bad they suck and are stupid. I mean, I don't even know if that's what you believe, but I think they're just a bunch of junk. It's often the business plan is the thing that the bank wants if you want funding, and it's all made up numbers anyway. It's all forecasted numbers. It's like not real numbers.
To a certain extent, you know, depending on the phase of your business and depending on where you are. You know, obviously, if you're starting brand new, you know, forecast is predicated on, hey, I think I can do this. But if you've got a few years in business and you looking to expand or bring in private equity or venture capital or additional bank financing or alternative financing, you know, a business plan is really an important document. But the challenge is that, you know, planning is essential, but plans are useless.
Yeah.
You know, and I think in March of 2020, we all realized that, you know, the plans that we might have had going into the year were null and void. And, you know, so it's part of the challenge or quite not part. The greatest challenge of this entrepreneurial journey is, you know, it's not always about the numbers and you know, forecasting and, you know, your digital marketing strategies and your sales strategies. Lots of times it's, you know, when you get punched in the gut, what are you going to do? How do you respond? How do you come back? And that's what I've seen, especially over the past 15 months or so with the pandemic, how some entrepreneurs have looked at this and said, you know, bring it on. I'll figure it out. I will come up with a way. And others just passively said, well, hopefully it'll end soon and I'll be fine.
What do you think the biggest challenge, you know, throwing out the pandemic for a second, I understand that that's more current and we obviously have ways to address that, but what do you think the biggest challenge is for small business as a whole?
Boy, I honestly think it is understanding that we are men and women first before we are businessmen and women. And I have a philosophical approach to this journey called entrepreneurship. And I believe that we as entrepreneurs live 3 movies simultaneously. I call that Heartset, Mindset, and Skillset. And that's called the Entrepreneurs Trilogy. And so the reason that I go there with that, and to answer your question, you know, what's the biggest challenge? The biggest challenge is realizing that it's not all about, you know, your business. It's like, as the entrepreneur, you have, you know, movie number 1, I call Heartset, which is your health, your relationships, and your happiness. And if we have that, if, you know, health is that one thing that, you know, we take for granted until it's taken away. Mm-hmm. So our health, our relationships, friends, family, spouse, kids, parents, neighbors, and our happiness. When you have those 3, you've kind of won this game called life, right? And the challenge with entrepreneurs, though, is they're looking for next level. It's like, how do I get to that next level? And so then it's movie number 2, which I call mindset, which is what's the stuff you're putting into your brain? And like, there is a fact. We all are who we are and where we are because of the stuff that's gone into our brain since birth. No one can deny that. So what do we put in and how do we motivate and drive ourselves? What are our goals? What are our dreams? What are the vision? And then do we take action? You know, do we move? So movie number 2 called mindset is what do we put in the mind? How do we motivate ourselves? And do we take action? What's the movement? And then eventually you get into the business stuff, which I'm not trivializing or undermining the importance of real life business stuff, because movie number 3 is called Skillset, meaning, and ultimately, what are our products, services? Who's our target market, ideal client? And what is our strategic marketing plan to basically, I look at business as kind of simple. It's kind of like, it's a dating game, right? We have a product or service, and we have a target market, ideal client. And then the job is, how do we introduce said product to the target market? So the greatest challenge in running a business is kind of accepting that it's not just about business. It's how do we become complete? How do we, you know, I have acquaintances that are multi-millionaire business owners and miserable. So, you know, what's the purpose? So when I work with a client, ultimately what we do is we design and craft a path for your dream business that aligns with the values and the goals of your dream life. I see it way too often where people go in the other direction. You know, they say, hey, I'm going to attack this business thing and come hell or high water, I'm going to win. What's the definition of win? Like, you build the business. I know many people build companies, sold them, and they're miserable. Like, so it's
yeah, that kind of happened to me, Mike. I mean, I had that agency for 16 years and I sold it, and I wasn't miserable, but I knew that the business kind of owned me as much as I owned the business. And so when I left, I said, yeah, I'm going to define my life in a different way. I'm going to define it with the word freedom, doing what I want, when I want, where I want, and how I want.
And you're fortunate. You were very fortunate, Matt.
Yeah. And I just say now, like, I mean, because here's the thing. I think what most people want when they leave the corporate world and start their own business is they want 3 things: more money, more time, and more freedom. And they don't get that. And so that's what I wrote my new book about, which is The High Five Effect: How to Do Business with People Who Bring You Joy. And so to me, I believe you achieve those things by surrounding yourself with great people, great clients, great partners, the great sources, other great business people who actually don't suck the soul out of you. They provide value, right? They increase the joy around you. They're up leveling you all the time.
Yep.
And to me, I actually define the word rich in a different way than a lot of people do. It's not monetarily for me. I measure it by the amount of joy in my life. And that's what makes me rich. It's not, yeah, certainly I need to pay my bills. We all do. But I don't strive to be a multimillionaire, with yachts and all these things. I'm perfectly happy just renting a boat.
Well, but think about what you just said. It's sort of like, when I talk about the first movie that we live, Heartset, our health, our relationships, and our happiness. So what's happiness? Happiness is being in alignment with our belief system. Meaning, if you believe that happiness is a 260-foot yacht in the Caribbean and you only have an 85-foot yacht, you're going to be miserable. If your goal is all about money and you end up down life's road not really knowing your spouse or your kids, or in your health is a mess, is that really winning? And so that's why whenever I work with clients, the very first thing I do is, let's design, your dream life. That's step one. It's like, let's craft, what is your dream life? Let's think about it in 5, 10, 15, 20 years. What is heaven to you? What is awesome? And very few people say, gee, I would say no one says, I hope that I don't have a relationship with my kids. I hope that my health is gone. No, that ends up manifesting because of this overwhelm that we deal with as entrepreneurs. And oftentimes it's overwhelming. And that's why, I say the holy grail of business is passion, purpose, and profits. And so if you can do something that you're passionate about and you're serving a greater good, and you can make money at it, and you should make money. If you're good, your value is high, you deserve to make money. So, but that's the holy grail. And people get it backwards. They go after business. They go after, hey, I'm going to do this stuff. And then they end up 20 years later, like, man, am I really happy? Did I
Mike, how did you get to this point as a business coach? And what were you doing before that put you on this path?
I've had multiple companies, Matt, and my last business, didn't end well. I put it this way: I built a big company and I was miserable. And I ended up winding down that business. And a few years ago, I got to the point where I said, what do I want to do? I was selling millions of dollars worth of product to the world's leading retailers. And, I'd go to Walmart and Target and Sam's Club and Costco and like have meetings with all these bigwigs. And it's like, wow, this is cool. I had 5 factories in Asia, and like, it was really fun, but I wasn't fulfilled. And so a few years ago when I wound the business down, I said, what do I love? And I love teaching. I during graduate school, I was always a teacher. I'm currently a volunteer for an organization called SCORE. And they help entrepreneurs on their journey. And I fell in love with teaching. And I'm like, well, okay, what do you want to teach? Well, I'm pretty good at building companies. I know how to do it. I love this entrepreneurial spirit. And so I said, okay, how do I marry the two? And I ended up building a business where, I've got 3 other companies, but what I do in this business is I help entrepreneurs. I love the spirit. Entrepreneurs are whacked. Like, who in their right mind would want to work 80 hours a week to avoid working 40?
Yeah, I know, right? Mike, what is your biggest challenge as a business owner?
Boy, my biggest challenge. It's funny because I don't think I have a single one challenge. When I look at, like, I call the heartbeat of business, which is your product portfolio, your target marketing, your strategic marketing plan, it's constantly changing and constantly evolving. The thing that I struggle to understand and keep up with is the world of marketing, the world especially of digital marketing, and all of the different options and alternatives that there are in the world. And I think it becomes overwhelming. And that's why I love what you do. I love what organizations like BNI does. I love when you actually put human beings together. Now, granted, the last 18 months has been virtual, but we're putting real people together, real humans talking to other humans. And it's really cool to be on, even if it's a 10-minute a connection to a webinar or one of your events, you get to meet another human being.
Yeah.
That's the high for me. So to me, the world of business, there's never one challenge. It's always, how do you balance the plates? You know, you got to keep all the plates spinning.
So would you say that you're a relationship-driven individual versus transaction-driven?
I think I have evolved into appreciating relationships more.
Interesting.
Yeah,
you've evolved, because before you were not.
Dude, I started a business. I had a dream. I had a vision. You know, I've started multiple companies, and each one starts with a dream, and you go after it. And, you know, now it's kind of like, I enjoy one-on-one interactions. I enjoy having a cup of coffee with a friend, you know. So, and oftentimes those relationships, those handshakes, those high fives, Matt Ward, turn into friendships.
Yeah.
And you will always in life do more for a friend than a business acquaintance, hands down.
That's why I always say that I have never believed that people do business with who they know, like, and trust, that they do business with who they know, like, trust, and care about. And it's that extra level that I talk about on stage, one more better. The things that you do that are one more better for your friends, for your, even if they're just acquaintances and contacts, but you care about them to a level that matters. It rises above what other people are doing. It makes others appreciate you more. And that produces relationships, which in turn produces referrals, which is awesome, right? But it doesn't always produce referrals. Sometimes it produces introductions to good referral sources.
It's funny you say know, like, and trust. Every time, lots of times when I'm dealing, whether I'm on a webinar or whether I'm on a podcast or speaking with my clients, I hold this up. And it's like, look, dude, whatever you're doing.
Hold on. We need to define what that is, because for the audio side of the podcast, it's a large Post-it note with KLT on it, which stands for Know, Like, Trust.
Exactly. And that is, you know, I used to sit on a board in Washington, D.C., and we would oftentimes go lobby Congress. We're trying to get some bills passed for, you know, kids and youth activity and stuff. But so much of Washington is relationship based. So much of Washington and the laws that are passed within our country are relationship based. Now, no one can tell me when there's a vote in the House and you've got 437, 35 people in the Senate or in the House voting on this. There's no one can tell me that all of the people that are Democrats believe one way and all the people that are Republicans believe another way. It's all about.
So my grandfather was a judge for the Social Security Administration. He lived in Roslyn, Virginia, just over the bridge from DC. And my grandmother worked on the Hill for the Department of Labor. And he told me, I was in his house one time in Roslyn on this condo up near whatever floor it was, this high-rise building. And he says to me, you know, I was 18 years old, Mike. And he says to me, you know, relationships are everything. It's who you know, not what you know. And I said, nah, Granddad, it's if you get in a conversation and you can't hold your own, you're going to look like an idiot. And he said, boy, listen to me. It's who you know, not what you know. And I was 18 years old and I didn't understand it then.
Yeah.
And as I got older, when I was in my early 30s, I realized, man, that damn old man was right. It's who you know, not what you know. And those relationships that you build, it's not just who you know, though. It's how well you know them, I think, to a degree, right? It's not just surface level. They have to be deep. And the deeper the relationships are, the more powerful they are, the more trusted they are, the more tight they are. And it's those things that produce so many other activities in our lives. They don't always produce referrals. I mean, I talk about it from a referral perspective, but to be perfectly honest with you, sometimes it's just literally, I ran out of gas on Route 2 one time, right? And I called a client who had a good relationship with that happened to have a landscaping company right around the corner. And Matt Landry, if you're listening, I'll never forget this story. I tell it in one of my speeches. And it is literally, he came to my rescue. And he never let me down about it. And he ribbed me for a long time. But I had someone to call. And I didn't have to call AAA. I called a friend. I phoned a friend, right? And so, I mean, those things, these are things. The funny thing about this all, Mike, though, is that we learn over time, right? And so business ownership is about constantly learning new things.
Well, yeah, and that's why, as part of whenever I do a speech or a webinar, I've actually got a presentation in Phoenix next week called, Swing for the Fence, How to Build a Multi-Million-Dollar Business and Live the Life of Your Dreams. And the reality is, it is 100% that I got offered that speech because of a friend of a friend.
Mm-hmm.
And so many things that we every day. I have two kids that are in college right now. They both play college sports. Now, it's not easy to get into a college to play college sports. The process of trying to get a kid into college and play college sports starts when they're freshman and sophomore in high school. It actually, in some sports, starts even earlier.
Mm-hmm.
Why? Because you need to start creating those relationships. You need to start creating those introductions. The coach, they see, any coach in any sport sees hundreds of potential kids that could join their team. Mm-hmm. But it's like, it's not about just the kid's talent. Oftentimes, it's the kid. It's like, how do they come across? So, and who do you know? Lots of times kids will join these very expensive AAU programs so that they can get underneath an umbrella of an organization that has connections throughout all of the colleges. Mm-hmm. It is fascinating in every aspect. You can take it from politics, you can take it from sports, you can take it from business. No matter how you slice it, Matt, the connections and the relationships that you have with other human beings is paramount to success in any aspect, especially business.
How do you work on your own business as far as educating yourself? What are the types of things that you do that you can share with the listening and viewing audience about the types of ways in which you educate yourself?
Matt, I am a personal development addict, and I've been one since I was 17 years old when I got introduced to Tony Robbins. And actually, I don't think it was Tony. I think it was Zig Ziglar, whoever it might be. But I started to, one of those, I said it earlier, like we are who we are where we are because of the things that have gone into our minds. Mm-hmm. We had zero control over our life for the first 18 years. We were influenced by our surrounding, our family, our neighborhood, our brothers and sisters. Did we grow up with money? Did we grow up in poverty, violence, abuse, drugs, alcohol? We were influenced by that. And so when you get out into the world, it's like people have different perspectives on stuff. I'm like, wow, no kidding. And so all of a sudden, when you start getting into this world, at least I get into the world of personal development, like, holy cow, this dude or this woman thinks so differently mm-hmm. than I was taught when I was growing up. And I think the ultimate key, my dad told me one thing that I'll never forget. He said, dude, you are the average of the 5 people you hang around with.
Yeah, that Jim Rohn said that. Yeah.
Yeah, and wherever it came from, it's like, it's so true. And if you want to up your game, you better learn how to hang around with people that play the game better or differently. It doesn't mm-hmm. always have to be better. It can be differently. So to answer your question, I'm a podcast addict. I'm a avid reader. I just finished working out, and what was I doing? I was watching a Tony Robbins video. I read incessantly. I just love learning stuff. I love when you look at life through someone else's lens. What was their upbringing like? What was their parents like? Go back to the world of sports. There are a lot of professional athletes that are children of professional athletes. I wonder why. They grew up in an environment of playing sports, professional sports. And so from the age of 0 all the way to the youth ages and the high school and college, it's all been about one thing. And so the types of stuff that you put in your brain can completely and dramatically change everything. I was in a bad place 4 or 5 years ago when, my business was not doing well. My mom was dying. My wife had pneumonia. She was in the hospital. She was in a bad spot. Then I got audited from the IRS, all in 4 weeks. The amount of stuff, the language that was going into my brain was awful. It was awful. And then I hired a coach, and that coach basically slapped me silly. I'll keep the G-rated version. I know you'll appreciate that. And I started to completely change my language, my philosophy, my physiology. Everything changed. So we can change who we are and where we are, but we have to change what goes into our brain, and we absolutely, imperatively have to change who we hang around with. So
yeah, absolutely. You mentioned that you read. Do you like paperback, hardcover, ebook? What type of version of reading do you like?
I am 80% ebook, 20% digital book, and podcasts and all of that. It's here because I'm always trying to do 2 things at the same time. I'm Mr. Efficient. So if I'm working out, I want to be pumping stuff in. If I'm going for a walk, I want to be pumping stuff in.
Yeah, awesome. Speaking of reading, I'd like to ask our guests, what one business book could you recommend that the listeners on the audio version of the podcast or even on the YouTube who are viewing, what one business book would you recommend that they sit down and read?
Oh boy. I read so many books. I think early on, and I just gave this to my 2 kids, The Magic of Thinking Big. It's an older book, but man, when I read that, I was probably in my teens, and it was just a completely different perspective on how to think about life. It got to the point where I was putting my kids would come home from school, and I would not ask them how they're doing. I said, "Why is your day great?" Because we all have an opportunity to focus on one thing or another. And I adopted a philosophy a long time ago, and it's still part of my morning routine right now, where I practice at least 5 minutes of gratitude. What are those things in my life I'm grateful for? And it's how you think about things, your perspective on stuff, your focus. The stuff you focus on manifests itself in your life. Your habits. Your habits manifest themselves into your physical being, your mental being, your spiritual being. So, I'm just a big advocate of putting good stuff in to get good stuff out. So, that's one book that I've loved, but I could sit here and rattle off hundreds.
Yeah, I read that book. I probably should get into that. And then what piece of software do you recommend that small business owners get their hands on so that they can continue to grow their small business?
Boy, I think that's kind of a fixed question because every business is different. I don't think there's one. If you run a restaurant, that's a lot different than running a manufacturing company. If you're running a coaching business, that's a lot different than if you're running a sports training.
Is there one piece of software that you've had that has helped you grow your business?
I think like if I was to think real business stuff, and I'm talking the sub $5 million business, and that's kind of the world that I've lived in. Or I should say that's the world I live in now with my clients. There's a sub $5 million business. The biggest mistake I think people make so often, and I'm talking $2, $3, $4 million business, is they don't know their numbers. And so, I hate to jump on the QuickBooks bandwagon, but QuickBooks is such an essential tool that people really need to get a handle on their business, their financials. And, I just think a lot of people miss it. So, I use all the Office programs.
No, I mean, other people on other episodes before you have mentioned QuickBooks, so I think that's a value for a lot of people. Something to think about. Mike, I appreciate sharing your insights. Yep.
I was going to say, if you want a hobby, don't worry about your numbers. if you want to run a business, you gotta kind of count the Benjamins.
Gotcha. I appreciate you sharing your insight on this podcast. Where can the listeners get a hold of you if they want to reach out and learn about you?
TheSavageSecrets.com. www.thesavagesecrets.com.
All right, great. We'll put it in the show notes. Folks, you heard right here from Mike. There's lots of great knowledge bombs dropped on this podcast episode. I hope you take a look at it. Make sure you take a look at the links in the show notes. Subscribe on your favorite podcast app. And make sure that you smash the like button and the subscribe button over on YouTube. We greatly appreciate it. Don't forget to live happy, smile a lot, and high five everyone around you.
I'm waking up this morning, gonna grab myself a smile.
Thank you for listening to the Mass Business Podcast, where we focus on growing a small business and understanding networking and referrals. Don't forget to like on your favorite platform and share out this podcast. This show has been produced by Heather Grant, music by Celtic Kelly, all rights reserved. I'm your host, professional speaker, author, and word-of-mouth referral consultant, Matt Ward. Don't forget to live happy, smile a lot, and high five everyone around you.
I'm feeling all right. High five the world. Yeah, yeah, yeah. High five the world. Make a difference today. High five the world. What a thing to say. You feel what I'm telling you? There's really nothing to it. It's just an attitude. Raise one in the air to put you in the mood.